Vanessa Whitmore had not come home early once in 2 years. Not once. Not for the birthday where Piper sat at the head of a table full of house staff and blew out 7 candles alone. Not for the parent-teacher night where Piper's teacher pulled the nanny aside and said quietly, "She draws a lot of pictures of empty chairs." Not for the Wednesday evenings when Piper padded down the hallway in socked feet, looked toward the front door, and then turned around without saying anything. Because she already knew. Vanessa's world ran on structure, on precision, on the kind of focused relentlessness that made her face appear on magazine covers, beside words like fearless and unstoppable and the most powerful woman in the room. Her company was worth more than most people could count. Her calendar was booked 4 months out. Her assistant kept a running list of everything she hadn't had time to respond to. Grief was on that list too. Somewhere in the bottom drawer of her home office desk, beneath a folder of unsigned documents, was a photo from Garrett's funeral. She hadn't opened that drawer in 8 months. She told herself she would. She told herself a lot of things at 30,000 feet. That Tuesday night, she was somewhere over Ohio when it started. Not a call, not an alert, just a feeling quiet and persistent, like a hand pressing against the center of her chest. She set down the acquisition brief she hadn't actually been reading for the past 40 minutes and stared at the window. Dark sky, cloud cover, her own reflection staring back at her. She pressed the intercom. "Cancel the breakfast meeting," she told her assistant. "I'm going home tonight. The summit doesn't end until—" "Cancel it." She didn't explain. She couldn't, because the only honest answer was, "I feel something." And Vanessa Whitmore had not built what she built by trusting feelings. Until tonight. The car cleared the gate at 9:44 p.m. The estate looked exactly as it always did. Warm amber light from the lower windows, manicured hedges, the long stone path lit softly from below. From the outside, it looked like the kind of place where nothing could go wrong. Vanessa had always been good at making things look that way. She stepped through the front door, set her bag down, stood still for a moment in the foyer, letting the silence settle around her. Then she heard it. Piper. Not the sounds of a bad dream, not a scraped knee or a dropped toy, or the small protests children make when they're simply alive and unhappy about something. This was different, higher, frightened in a way that moved through Vanessa's chest before her mind had finished processing it. She was on the stairs before she knew she'd moved. The hallway, the nursery wing, the door to Piper's room half open, warm light spilling into the hall. Vanessa pushed it the rest of the way and stopped breathing. Celeste Thompson stood in the center of the room. Her gray uniform was pulled loose at one shoulder. Her natural curly hair was down around her face, slightly wild. Both arms were wrapped tight around Piper, who had her face pressed into Celeste's neck, fingers clutching the fabric of her uniform, not trying to get away, holding on. And in Celeste's right hand, hanging low at her side, a kitchen knife, both of them trembling. Vanessa's hand found the doorframe. She had survived hostile takeovers. She had buried her husband at 40 and kept standing. She had walked into rooms full of people who wanted her to fail and walked back out with everything she came for. She could not find a single word. Celeste's eyes met hers wide, desperate, not guilty, like someone who had been holding a door shut for days and was only now, finally, not alone. Before we go any further, drop your country in the comments and tell me what time it is where you are. And if you believe some people are placed in our lives for a reason, you already know what to do. Vanessa's lips parted. Her grip tightened on the doorframe. And then Piper, still crying, still holding on slowly, lifted her face from Celeste's shoulder. Her light brown hair was damp at her temples. Her eyes found her mother's across the room. And she said 5 words. Quiet, certain, completely clear. "Mama." She was protecting me. Those 5 words hung in the air. Vanessa didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there in the doorway of her daughter's pink bedroom, one hand still gripping the frame, trying to make sense of what her body already understood, but her mind couldn't catch up to yet. She was protecting me. From what? She looked at Celeste. Celeste looked back at her chest heaving, knife still at her side, eyes full of something that wasn't guilt, wasn't threat, was something older and more desperate than either of those things. Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it. Piper had already pressed her face back into Celeste's shoulder. Still holding on, Vanessa stood there for one more second. Then she stepped fully into the room, crossed to her daughter, and pulled her close, not taking her from Celeste, just reaching her. Piper's arms went around her mother's neck, and for a moment, the three of them were still. Outside the window, something shifted in the dark. But that comes later. To understand that night, you have to understand the 18 months that came before it. You have to understand what this house used to sound like. Garrett Whitmore died on a Tuesday morning. He was 41 years old. He went out for a run at 6:15 and was gone before 7. Cardiac event. No warning. No history. Just here and then, not in the time it takes to make coffee. Piper was 5. The house changed overnight. Not dramatically. Not loudly. The way a room changes when you leave a window open in November, gradually, quietly, until one day you realize the warmth left and you can't remember exactly when. Vanessa went back to work in 11 days. People called it strength. Her board called it admirable. Her sister-in-law, Diane, stood in Vanessa's kitchen 2 weeks after the funeral and said, very carefully, "You're allowed to fall apart." Vanessa had looked at her and said, "Piper needs stability." What she meant was, "I don't know how to do this any other way." The logic was airtight. Piper needed security. Security meant the company stayed strong. The company staying strong meant Vanessa stayed in motion, forward, always forward. Because the one time she had slowed down, the one morning she had let the day be soft and unhurried, the phone had rung and everything changed. She was not going to slow down again. What she didn't see, what she couldn't see from inside the motion, was what the stillness looked like from 5 years old. Piper stopped asking for much, not all at once, gradually. She had been a loud, imaginative child, the kind who narrated everything, who turned the hallway into a racetrack and the kitchen into a laboratory. Garrett had called her a full-volume human being. After he was gone, the volume came down, slowly, week by week, until she was quiet in a way that looked like calm but wasn't. She drew pictures of houses, 4 figures outside, 1 crossed out. She ate small amounts and moved food around her plate. She asked, once a week, if Mama was coming home for dinner. When the answer was no, which it almost always was, she nodded like she'd already known. Like she'd asked more out of habit than hope. She was 5 years old, and she was learning not to be disappointed. That detail should break something in you. It broke something in everyone who noticed it. The problem was, the person who needed to notice it most was always somewhere over a different city. 3 nannies came and went in 8 months. One too formal Piper called her the robot and refused to eat breakfast if she was in the room. One who was kind enough, but spent half her day on her phone. One who quit after 14 days, telling the agency only that the house felt heavy. Then Trisha, Vanessa's personal assistant, sent a name. Celeste Thompson, relocating from Atlanta. Strong references, quiet manner. Available immediately. Vanessa scheduled the interview mostly out of exhaustion. That night, she read through the application at her desk. Everything standard, everything fine, until she reached the last section. Why do you want this position? 5 words. Because children deserve to feel safe. Vanessa set the paper down. She didn't sleep. If this story is already reaching you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. The morning of the interview, Vanessa was already in her chair when the doorbell rang. She checked the time. 7 minutes early. Most candidates arrived exactly on time, rehearsed, deliberate, trying to signal precision without appearing eager. A few had come late, with polished apologies ready. One had asked for coffee before sitting down. Celeste Thompson walked in quietly. No portfolio, no rehearsed opening line. She was dressed simply clean, dark slacks, a plain button-down, shoes that were well kept but old at the heel. She sat in the offered chair, back straight, hands folded in her lap. She didn't look around the room the way most people did when they entered a house like this, cataloging it, measuring themselves against it. She just looked at Vanessa and waited. Vanessa, who had interviewed executives at $40,000 tables, noticed immediately this woman was not performing. The questions were standard: work history, experience with children, how she handled emergencies. Celeste answered each one directly, without embellishment, no overselling, no careful pauses designed to sound thoughtful. She had worked 2 households before this. She was good with routines. She understood that children needed consistency more than they needed entertainment. Then Vanessa asked the question she always asked last: why should I trust you with my daughter? The other candidates had all answered quickly: credentials, references, years of experience, the right words in the right order. Celeste went quiet. Not searching for an answer, quiet. Something else. Like she was deciding between the polished version and the true one and choosing. Because I know what it feels like, she said. Her voice was steady but not rehearsed. To be small and frightened in a house full of adults who are busy being something else. The room went still. Vanessa held her gaze. Didn't ask what she meant. Didn't need to. Something in Celeste's face told her the story behind those words was painful and not fully healed. And something about that, the honesty of it, the lack of any attempt to wrap it neatly, landed in Vanessa's chest in a way she hadn't expected. Before she could respond, small feet padded across the hallway. Piper appeared in the doorway. Mismatched socks, one yellow, one with small blue stars, a stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. She stood at the threshold and studied Celeste the way children study things they're not sure about yet, with full, unguarded attention and no attempt to hide it. Celeste looked at her. And then she did something none of the 3 previous candidates had done. She waited. No wide smile, no high voice, no leaning forward with practiced warmth. She just looked at Piper and was still the way you stay still around something that needs to decide for itself whether you're safe. Piper looked at her for a long moment. Then she walked across the room and held out the rabbit. He has a hurt ear, she said. Celeste took the rabbit carefully with both hands. She examined the left ear, then the right, then the left again. Her expression was completely serious. We should probably check the other one too, she said, just to be sure. Piper studied her face, checking for condescension, finding none. Then she sat down on the floor next to Celeste's chair. Just like that. Vanessa watched from across the room. Something loosened in her chest, something she hadn't known was clenched until it wasn't anymore. She offered Celeste the position that evening. Above the agency rate, private room off the nursery wing, start date as soon as possible. When Celeste said thank you, it was quiet and direct and completely without performance. The kind of gratitude that doesn't dress itself up because it doesn't need to. It made the room feel smaller in the best possible way. Something had happened here. Vanessa couldn't name it yet. If Celeste's answer to that question moved you the way it moved Vanessa, hit like, some words don't leave you. That night, Vanessa paused outside Piper's door. Inside, she heard Piper's voice, very serious, explaining something important. His full name is Captain Button Whitmore. And then Celeste. That is an extremely important name, and I will never forget it. Vanessa leaned her forehead against the doorframe and closed her eyes. Not in sadness, in something that hadn't visited this house in a long time. The change didn't announce itself. That was the thing about it. There was no single morning where Vanessa woke up and thought something is different. It happened the way light changes in a room when clouds shift, gradually, undeniably. Until one day you look up and realize the whole quality of the air has changed, and you can't point to the exact moment it happened. 3 weeks after Celeste Thompson walked into this house, It started breathing again. It started in the kitchen. Not with catered deliveries in sealed containers, not with the rotation of prepared meals the previous staff had maintained with clockwork efficiency, with actual cooking. The smell of butter in a pan at 7 in the morning, the sound of Piper's voice raised in genuine argument. Syrup does not go on the eggs, Cece. It's adjacent to the eggs. That's different. That's the same thing. Is it, though? Vanessa had stopped at the bottom of the stairs that Saturday morning, still in yesterday's blazer, overnight bag at her feet. She had just come through the door. She stood there and listened to her daughter argue about syrup placement, with complete conviction, flour on her cheek. Button the rabbit propped against the fruit bowl, and felt something move in her chest she couldn't immediately name. Piper was eating full meals. That alone was something Vanessa hadn't seen in months. She laughed at dinner now. Real laughter, sudden and unguarded. The kind that startles itself. The kind Garrett used to call her full-volume laugh. Vanessa had thought that sound was gone. She had quietly grieved it, without telling anyone. It wasn't gone. It had just been waiting for the right room. On the evenings, Vanessa made it home before 8, which was not often, but more than before, she found herself stopping in doorways, not entering, just listening. Celeste on the floor of Piper's room, while Piper gave a complete, fully narrated biography of every stuffed animal on her shelf. Celeste at the kitchen table helping with homework, asking questions rather than giving answers. Celeste at the school pickup line, the one face Piper's teacher had mentioned, that Piper ran toward. Not walked, ran. One evening at dinner, Piper mentioned a fight with a girl named Lily from her class. A real fight hurt feelings. A whole week of tension, resolved that afternoon with a conversation Piper said she'd practiced out loud the night before. Cece helped me figure out what to say, Piper said, like it was obvious, like it was just how things worked. Vanessa nodded, smiled, said she was proud, and then sat with it quietly for the rest of the meal. She hadn't known about the fight, hadn't known about Lily, hadn't known there had been a whole week of tension in her daughter's life that she had moved through and resolved without Vanessa knowing a single detail. Celeste had been living Piper's daily life. Vanessa had been managing it from a distance, from a calendar, from a series of check-ins that apparently covered nothing that actually mattered. She didn't say any of that out loud. She just passed the bread and kept smiling. The first shadow came 11 days later, late, after midnight. Vanessa was heading back from her office toward the main staircase when she passed the corridor near Celeste's room. The light was on under the door. That wasn't unusual. The voice was low, strained, nothing like the easy, unhurried tone she used with Piper. I told you I need more time. You can't do this. A pause. Then quieter. Please. Vanessa slowed without meaning to. Stood in the hallway for a moment. Then kept walking. Staff had lives, problems, families. She knew that. The next morning, Mrs. Aldrich, who had worked in this house longer than anyone, mentioned, carefully, that a framed photo from the upstairs study had been moved. Not missing. Just not where it had been. Probably the cleaning rotation, Vanessa said. Mrs. Aldrich nodded slowly. But her eyes said something else entirely. If this story is getting to you, subscribe. We tell stories about the people who hold things together when no one is watching. That night, Vanessa sat on the edge of Piper's bed, long after she'd fallen asleep. She watched her daughter's face, the softness in it, the ease, the way her shoulders had no tension in them, the way her breathing was slow and even, the way her hand rested loosely around Button like she didn't need to hold on so hard anymore. She looked like a child who felt safe. Vanessa stayed there for a long time. Then, barely above a whisper to no one, to the room, to a version of herself she'd been avoiding for 2 years. I think I've been failing you. Nobody heard it. But it was the most honest thing she'd said out loud in a very long time. 3 months before she ever set foot in the Whitmore house, Celeste Thompson's phone rang at a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. She was sitting in her car outside a gas station in Atlanta, between jobs, 2 weeks behind on rent, going through her contacts trying to think of anyone she hadn't already called. The unknown number rang twice. She picked up. The man on the other end introduced himself as Rowan Mercer. He said he worked in private consulting. He said he'd gotten her name from someone who used to work with her former employer's family, a nephew, a man with money troubles of his own. Mercer's offer was brief and delivered without pressure. Get hired in a Connecticut household, the Whitmore estate. Observe, report schedules. Nothing physical, nothing dangerous, just information. He knew she needed the work. He knew exactly how much. She said yes. She told herself it was temporary, uncomfortable but survivable. She told herself she would find another job quickly and leave before anything went further. She told herself a lot of things. She was wrong about all of them. The first 3 weeks, the requests were exactly what Mercer had described. What time did Vanessa leave in the mornings? Which nights was the house empty? Did the security system have gaps in the rear perimeter? Then week 4 arrived, and Mercer's voice changed. We need access to the child, he said. Calm, unhurried, like he was discussing a schedule change. Not harmed, not for long, just long enough to make her mother understand what it costs to take everything from a man. Celeste had been standing in her bathroom at 1 in the morning. The tile was cold under her feet. The light above the mirror buzzed faintly. She stared at her own reflection and felt the floor of the situation drop out completely. She asked who she was working for. Mercer paused. Then, Conrad Hale. She didn't know the name. Later, she looked it up. Conrad Hale, former business partner, forced out of a $200 million deal by Vanessa Whitmore 4 years ago. Lost his company in the fallout. Then his marriage. Then, according to one article buried on page 9 of a financial publication, his youngest son, a boy of 19, who had taken the collapse of his father's life harder than anyone had anticipated. Conrad Hale had decided that equal suffering was the only justice the law hadn't given him. And he had found Celeste Thompson in a gas station parking lot in Atlanta and handed her the key. She sat on the edge of her bathtub that night and did the math. Go to the police. Mercer had already made it simple. We know where your mother lives. We know your sister's address in Decatur. We know everything about you, Celeste. Everything. No proof, no recordings, no name above Mercer that she could hand anyone. Just her word, against lawyers who ate her, kind of word for breakfast. Run, and Piper would be left alone in a house where someone already had the blueprint. Stay and comply, and she would hand an innocent 7-year-old child to people who had already lost the part of themselves that hesitates. Every version of the future was dirty. Every exit had a cost. She sat there until the water in the tap stopped dripping, until the house went completely silent, until the only sound was her own breathing. Then she made her decision. She would not comply. She would not run. She would stay, and she would put herself physically between Piper and whatever was coming until she found another way out. She started sleeping on the floor just outside Piper's room. She memorized the security layout not to dismantle it, but to know where it could be beaten so she could watch those places herself. She carried it alone, every single day, with a smile at breakfast and a bedtime story at 8, and nothing on her face that said the world was closing in. What would you have done in her place? There's no easy answer. Drop it below. I genuinely want to know. 3 weeks later, Mercer called again. His voice was different this time. Done with patience. 72 hours, he said. After that, we stop asking. The line went dead. Celeste stood in the hallway, phone in her hand, the house quiet around her. She walked to Piper's door and opened it softly. The room was still, warm lamplight, button tucked under Piper's arm, her small fingers loose around him, her face completely peaceful, a child who had no idea. Celeste sat down in the chair by the window and did not sleep, because 72 hours had already started. And she still had no way out. 72 hours. Celeste moved through the next morning like someone walking a wire she couldn't let anyone see. Every task completed. Every smile delivered on time. Breakfast made. Piper's hair brushed. Lunch packed. The rhythm of the house maintained with the kind of precision that takes everything you have when everything you have is already spoken for. But cracks don't ask permission. Vanessa noticed the phone first. Always face down. Every surface Celeste set it on, countertop, windowsill, dining table, face down. Within reach, never far. Most people left their phones face up. It was a small thing. The kind of thing you'd dismiss once and forget twice. But Vanessa had spent 20 years reading rooms and the people in them, and small things had a way of adding up before you knew you were counting. Then she noticed the windows. Not obviously, not constantly, but once per room, sometimes twice. Celeste's eyes would move to the glass. A quick check, habitual. The way someone looks when they're tracking something outside the frame of the conversation. And the east corridor, the stretch near the back staircase where the camera coverage had a narrow gap, Celeste had started avoiding it when others were around. Not dramatically, just a slight rerouting. A different path to the same place. Vanessa filed it, said nothing. Mrs. Aldridge came to her on a Wednesday evening. She closed the study door behind her, which she only did when something mattered. She stood with her hands folded and chose her words the way someone chooses steps on uncertain ground carefully, with full weight behind each one. "Something is weighing on that girl," she said. "I've worked in houses long enough to know the difference between tired and burdened. That one is burdened." Vanessa looked up from her desk. Has she done something? No. Has anything gone missing? Has Piper said anything? No, nothing like that. Mrs. Aldridge paused. It's not what she's done. It's what she's carrying. And I've lived long enough to know that when a person carries something that heavy, it doesn't always stay inside them. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "What do you want me to do?" Mrs. Aldridge moved to the door. "Just watch," she said. "That's all." The next morning, Vanessa found Celeste alone in the kitchen. She didn't approach it like an interrogation. She poured her own coffee, leaned against the counter, and asked simply, "Is something wrong?" Celeste's expression moved through three things in about 1 second. Tightened, steadied, smoothed. "Just my family," she said. "My mother's health. It's been a difficult few weeks." Vanessa set down her cup. "You should have told me. The household account has a medical provision. We can cover it." Something passed through Celeste's face then, real, unguarded. For just a moment, the weight of it was completely visible, not the medical bills, not the mother in Atlanta, but the whole impossible thing she was holding that no medical provision on earth could touch. "Thank you," she said. She meant it completely. And she also knew it changed nothing. That afternoon, Piper didn't leave her side. Room to room, hand always inches from Celeste's sleeve. Not clingy, deliberate, like she had decided something without the vocabulary to explain it. "Stay," she said at one point, tugging gently. "I mean really stay." Celeste knelt down, looked at her directly. "I'm right here. Promise?" The words sat between them. "I promise," Celeste said. Children feel things before adults can name them. Both of them understood, in different ways, how much weight that word was holding. If you're not subscribed yet and this story is already living rent-free in your head, you know what to do. They spent the late afternoon in the garden. Piper running, Celeste chasing her with exaggerated slowness, real laughter, the echoing kind, the kind that belongs outdoors. Celeste watched every moment and held it. The way Piper tilted her head when she was thinking, the sound she made when she tripped over her own feet and laughed at herself before she'd even finished falling. She memorized all of it. Because part of her, the part that had been awake since Mercer's call, was afraid this was the last ordinary day. As the sun dropped toward the tree line and the garden went gold and quiet, Piper slowed. She turned and looked at Celeste the way children look when they've been watching you longer than you realized. Your eyes look like when people want to cry but don't, she said. Celeste went completely still. Piper didn't wait for an answer. She stepped forward and wrapped both arms around her tight, certain, the full weight of a 7-year-old who had decided something. I love you, Cece. Celeste closed her eyes. One tear slipped free. Just one. Because love, real love, doesn't make impossible choices easier. It makes them impossible. The call came at 10:17 p.m. Celeste was sitting in the chair by Piper's window where she'd been sitting most nights for 2 weeks when her phone lit up face down on the armrest. She already knew who it was before she turned it over. She stepped into the hallway and answered. Mercer's voice was unhurried, the way dangerous things often are when they've stopped needing to persuade you. Tonight, he said, East Side entrance, 11:30. You bring her down, you walk away clean. Your mother stays well. Your sister stays safe. You disappear, and this is over. Celeste said nothing. Or, he continued, same tone, same pace. We come for her another way, and you won't be there when we do. The line went dead. She stood in the hallway for a moment. The house was completely quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight. Then she walked to Piper's doorway and stood there. The room was dim, lit only by the small nightlight near the bookshelf. Piper was asleep on her side, button tucked under one arm, her fingers loosely curled around him, her face completely still. Completely unaware of the clock ticking 20 feet away in the hallway. Celeste stepped inside. She didn't wake her. She just sat back down in the chair by the window and looked at her really looked the way she had on 100 other nights. The curve of her cheek. The way her lips parted slightly in sleep. The tiny scar on her chin from a fall off the back porch, steps 3 weeks ago, that Celeste had cleaned and bandaged, while Piper insisted, tearfully, that she was absolutely fine. And in the watching, something that had been cracking for weeks finally broke open. Not her resolve. Her fear. It fell away not all at once, but like something that had been gripping her, releasing finger by finger, and what was left underneath was simpler and cleaner and harder than anything fear had ever felt like. She was not going to let anyone take this child. Not for money, not for her mother's medical bills, not for her sister's safety, not for anything Mercer had offered or threatened, not for any version of clean he was selling. Not this child. At 11:08, the sound came. Footsteps on the garden gravel below the window. Slow, deliberate. The specific rhythm of someone who is trying to be careful rather than someone who happens to be there. They came early. Celeste was on her feet before the second footstep landed. She crossed to the window, a shadow at the edge of the exterior light, moving along the east wall, pausing, moving again, testing, measuring. She didn't hesitate. Down the back stairs, kitchen, the knife block on the counter. She pulled the longest one, turned, and was back up the stairs in under 40 seconds. Back to Piper's door. She turned the lock, crossed to the bed. Piper. Low. Steady. Wake up, baby. Piper surfaced slowly, blinking, confused. Then her arms went up automatically, completely around Celeste's neck, the way they always did when she was half asleep and someone she trusted was close. Button was still in her hand. Cece? I've got you, Celeste said. Stay quiet. I've got you. She lifted her, settled her against her chest. Piper's face went into her shoulder, the same way it had in Chapter 3 that first afternoon, before any of this, when a little girl in mismatched socks had decided someone was safe and held on. The knife was in Celeste's right hand, blade down, her body turned toward the door. She stood in the center of the room and waited. Footsteps in the hallway, slow at first, then stopping. The door handle moved. The lock held for 1 second. Then the door swung open. The overhead light came on sharp and sudden, and standing in the doorway, cream-white suit, overnight bag still in her hand, blonde hair down, face frozen in a horror that had no name yet, was Vanessa Whitmore, Her eyes moved. Celeste's face. Piper's tear-streaked one. The knife. Her mouth opened. Before a single word came out, Piper lifted her head from Celeste's shoulder, found her mother's eyes across the room. Her voice was small. Certain. Mama, she was protecting me. And then from somewhere below the window, the sound of gravel shifting under weight. Someone was still out there. Vanessa's first instinct was to cross the room and pull Piper away from her. She was already moving when Piper's words stopped her feet. She was protecting me. Vanessa looked at her daughter's face. Really looked. And what she saw wasn't a child frightened of the woman holding her. It was a child frightened of something outside the room. Something beyond the window, beyond the wall. Something that existed in a world Piper couldn't fully name, but had already felt closing in. Vanessa set her bag down on the floor. She looked at Celeste, at the knife now resting on the nightstand. At Celeste's hands, steady now, finally still, like someone who had been braced for impact for so long that the actual collision was almost a relief. Talk, Vanessa said, now. And this time, Celeste did. All of it. Rowan Mercer. The phone call in the Atlanta parking lot. The job offer dressed up as surveillance. The moment 3 weeks in when she understood what it actually was. Conrad Hale's name. The threats against her mother. Her sister's address. The 72-hour deadline that had run out 40 minutes ago. Vanessa stood at the foot of Piper's bed and listened without interrupting once. Her face was unreadable. Not cold, contained. The way a room goes quiet before something moves fast. When Celeste finished, the silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Vanessa took out her phone. Doyle, her security chief. East Perimeter. 3-man sweep. Right now. Quietly. Don't trip the exterior lights. She paused, listening. I don't care what time it is. Move. She hung up. Looked at Piper asleep again now. Finally, exhausted back into stillness. Button clutched under her arm. She pulled the blanket up, smoothed it once with her palm. Then she walked into the hallway and waited. It took 11 minutes. The man at the garden wall hadn't made it inside yet. He was positioned at the east corner waiting, phone in hand, a photo of Piper on the screen. He didn't run when Doyle's team found him. He looked almost relieved, the way people look when something they've been holding finally lands. He gave up Mercer's contact information without much resistance. Within the hour, the connection was confirmed. Within 2, Mercer had been located at a motel 40 minutes outside the city. Conrad Hale's name surfaced through one of Vanessa's private intelligence contacts just before 4 in the morning, attached to a paper trail that would take Hale's lawyers approximately no time to realize they couldn't contain. Vanessa received each update standing in her kitchen, back straight, face composed. She had managed crises in boardrooms. She had held her company together through market collapses and hostile bids, and the kind of pressure that dismantled lesser organizations overnight. She had never done it like this. In her kitchen, at 3 in the morning, while her daughter slept upstairs, and the woman who had saved her sat across the table with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. When the last call ended, the house was quiet again. Vanessa sat down. How long did you know? She asked. 5 days, Celeste said. Why didn't you come to me? Celeste looked at her. Steady, direct. Would you have believed me? The silence that followed was long and honest, and answered the question completely. No, Vanessa said finally. Probably not. She looked down at her own hands on the table. These hands. The ones that had closed the Hale deal in a conference room 4 years ago, without fully calculating what it cost a man on the other side of it. The ones that had sent a text instead of coming home for Piper's birthday concert. The ones that held a phone in every moment that should have held her daughter. I've been failing her, she said. It wasn't self-pity. It wasn't performance. It was the flattest, most undecorated, true thing she'd said in 2 years. Celeste didn't fill the silence. She let it be true. If this story hit you somewhere you weren't expecting, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear it today. After a while, Vanessa stood and walked to the kitchen window. The grounds were still now, secure, lit softly by the exterior lamps that Doyle's team had finally cleared. She looked out at it for a long moment. Then, quietly, almost to herself, "You stayed." A pause. When you could have walked away, you stayed. Celeste didn't answer immediately. Then, she needed someone to... Vanessa turned from the window, looked at her across the kitchen, this woman in a gray uniform with tired eyes that somehow still held something steady in them. This woman who had carried something unbearable, alone, for 5 days, and had still been outside Piper's door every single night. "So did I," Vanessa said, and meant both of them. 3 weeks later, Conrad Hale's attorney called Vanessa's legal team, requesting a settlement discussion. Vanessa was in her office when she got the message. She read it once, set her phone face up on the desk, face up, the way she always had before any of this, and told her attorney to respond with 2 words. "Let it proceed." "They're offering a significant number," her attorney said carefully. "I know," Vanessa said. "I want it on record. All of it. His name, his plan, the photo of my daughter on a stranger's phone at midnight. I want a courtroom to say it out loud." The woman who had spent 20 years closing things quietly, containing damage, managing narrative, that woman had made a different calculation. Somewhere between a kitchen at 3 in the morning and a child's face in the dark, something had shifted in her. She no longer wanted to contain the story. She wanted it told. She canceled the Thursday summit, then the Friday early flight. She was home for dinner 3 nights in a row, which had not happened since before Garrett died. She didn't make an announcement about it. Didn't explain or apologize for the years of absence that preceded it. She just came home, set her bag down, walked into the kitchen. Piper didn't say anything about it either. She just started saving Vanessa a seat at the table. No ceremony, no commentary, just a chair pulled out slightly, a place set, the quiet matter-of-fact generosity of a child who has stopped bracing for disappointment and started making room instead. Children forgive in practice before they forgive in words. Vanessa was learning that. One evening, after dinner, she sat with Piper on the floor of the living room with a photo album neither of them had opened since the funeral. They went through it slowly. Most pages, they just looked. Didn't narrate. Didn't explain the emotions out loud. Then Piper stopped on a photo of Garrett at a beachhead back, laughing at something off camera, the full volume laugh that had filled every room he walked into. "He had a really good laugh," Piper said. "Yeah," Vanessa said quietly. "He really did." They sat with it. Not fixed, not resolved, just shared the weight of it, held between 2 people instead of carried alone in separate rooms. It was the most honest 20 minutes Vanessa had spent in 2 years. She met with her attorney the following Monday. She gave instructions that she did not discuss with Celeste beforehand. The medical account expanded, permanent, covering Celeste's mother in Atlanta without restriction. The debt that Mercer had used as leverage cleared completely and documented so that no one could ever use it against her again. A formal restructuring of Celeste's role in the household, no title that fit neatly into any category, because what Celeste was to this family didn't fit neatly into any category. She did these things without announcement. Celeste found out on a Wednesday afternoon through a letter from the attorney's office. Standard envelope, her name typed on the front. She read it once, standing in the hallway. Then she sat down on the bottom stair and read it again. The debt gone. Her mother's care covered, her role redefined to reflect her actual place in the Whitmore household, effective immediately. She folded the letter carefully, held it in both hands for a moment. Then she got up and walked to the kitchen. Piper was at the table doing homework, pencil moving steadily, button propped against the fruit bowl in his usual position. Vanessa was sitting across from her, not on her phone, not on her laptop. Just there, present in the specific, quiet way she was still learning how to be. Celeste stood in the doorway. Vanessa looked up. You okay? Celeste nodded slowly. Then, I don't know what I am here. It wasn't a complaint. It was an honest question from a woman who had spent her whole life being categorized employee, contractor, help, and was standing in a doorway holding a letter that didn't fit any of those words. Vanessa held her gaze. Your family, she said. Simply, without decoration. That's what you are. Piper didn't look up from her homework. She just reached over and slid her pencil case slightly to the left. Making room. Celeste sat down at the table. And in a house that had once felt like a museum of things that used to be alive, something was alive again. Not loudly, not dramatically. The way real things come back, quietly, in the middle of an ordinary Wednesday, around a kitchen table with homework and a stuffed rabbit and 3 people who had chosen each other in the hardest possible way. Not because it was built, because it was chosen. Because one woman with nothing to gain and everything to lose had stayed. And in staying, changed everything. Sometimes the people who protect us most are the ones we almost didn't see. If this story reminded you of someone like that, tell them. Don't wait. And if it moved you, like, share, and subscribe. We tell stories about the people who hold things together when no one is watching. Drop your country below and tell me, what would you have done in Celeste's place? I'll be reading every single one.